This is Megan McDuffie, and you are listening to River City Girls on Pixelated Audio.
Welcome to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it.
Today, we're going to be playing music and talking about River City Girls, a new game that just came out on Switch, Steam, PS4, Xbox One, pretty much everything, and is doing pretty well right now. So we're really excited to talk about this, share the music with you guys, and we've got a special guest with us, the composer of the music and everything we're going to be listening to today, Megan McDuffie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So that track that brought us in was called Lunch Money from River City Girls. What'd you think, Gene?
Well, I like most of the songs on this soundtrack, and I know Brian and I are probably going to say this a bunch, but we had a hard time whittling it down.
We did. There's about 40-something tracks, right?
Yeah, well, no, I think there's more than that. It's about 50 that you wrote, plus 3 other artists who we'll talk about. Collectively made it about another 10 tracks or so. Right.
So let's go ahead and jump right into it. River City Girls is a classic action beat-em-up sprinkled with RPG elements, released September 5th, so just a few weeks ago from the time of this recording, for the Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and Steam. It was developed by WayForward Technologies with oversight and some publishing handled by Arc System Works. Now, you may know WayForward from the work on Shantae and their whole series behind that, the Mighty Switch Force series, DuckTales Remastered, Double Dragon Neon, Contra 4, and many other games. River City Girls actually stands on the shoulders of long-running and well-cherished River City series, known in Japan as the Kunio-Kun series. And we've brought it up here before, but the games typically revolve around 2 tough dudes, Kunio and Riki, or Alex and Ryan in the NES River City Ransom title, that consistently find their girlfriends kidnapped by local thugs. At least that's the general formula. So some of the games in the series are Renegade, River City Ransom, Crash and the Boys, Super Dodgeball, and Nintendo World Cup. And they're all pretty identifiable, even the localized versions that changed a lot when they made their way over here. For these short, squatty characters, usually like a buzz cut, a digento, as they're known in Japanese, the pompadour, the Japanese pompadour. And the games span over numerous systems. There's the NES, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive, Neo Geo, PC Engine. Pretty much every platform has seen a Kunio game at some point.
Yeah, up to today even.
Yeah.
So the series was originally developed by Technos in 1986. They released tons of titles pretty much all the way up until their bankruptcy in 1996. After that, all of their IP was purchased by Million Co. They put out some of the titles for various systems like the GBA port of River City Ransom, up until about 2015 when Arc System Works acquired the IP and then started developing the games themselves. So Arc System Works is probably best known for the Guilty Gear and Blaze Blue series, but they've been developing games since the late 80s when they were mostly known for ports and spin-offs for companies like Sega, Namco, Bandai, that sort of thing. One of the first games they made was the SMS port of Double Dragon, so they've had a close relationship with Technos pretty much since the beginning, so they're well versed in the whole Kunio series. And of course, Technos other IPs. And intermittently, they've also developed some of the Kunio games during the mid-2000s. And we want to stop talking about all of that to talk a little bit more with Megan because,
right.
We just wanted to get all that background stuff out of the way.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, did you know the whole backstory about the Kunio-Kun games when you got into this?
I did not.
Oh, well, we're just here to educate.
Now I do.
Awesome.
About myself, huh? Where do you want me to start?
How do you get into music? Like, what led you down that path?
It was never a conscious choice. I think it to sound super cliche, it chose me.
Nice.
I don't know. I just always was doing something musical, something music related. Started taking piano when I was 8. Shortly thereafter, started doing choir, and I pretty much just kept doing musicals and jazz choir and festivals and all that stuff through high school into college, and I knew I wanted to keep pursuing music. So I actually started as a voice major and then realized I didn't want to sing opera professionally because that's how they train you in college, is very classical and
Right.
It's a familiar story, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I loved the classical foundation that I had, but I didn't want to keep going with that. So I switched to film scoring, which is a completely different discipline,
Right.
but equally as exciting or more exciting to me. And from there, I kind of just networked my ass off.
Nice. So, it's funny because a lot of our interviews we do over Skype or what have you. We're doing a remote location interview again. Megan actually lives right down the street from me. And so this was perfect, and it worked out really well because she's sitting right in front of us and we're able to actually have a face-to-face conversation for once.
Yeah, this is a bit of an odd story, but I actually met Megan a few years ago. I run a meetup here locally in the Bay Area, and we were looking for people to host some talks on music production, just the industry in general. And I found Megan's website on Production Hub, one of these sites. I honestly don't even remember what it was. Yeah, and there weren't that many people that were in the South Bay, so I just started emailing everybody. Megan's site was the most professional and most well put together, so I'm like, she knows what she's doing. I'm going to reach out to her and see if she wants to give a talk.
How long ago was this?
About 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and since then, I've sort of been tapping her on the shoulder for random things like, hey, here's a gig. Here's somebody that might want to talk to you.
Awesome.
And you actually gave a talk at MagWest 2 years ago, MagWest 1.
That's right.
It's up on YouTube. I don't remember the name of it. It's Badass Ladies of Video Game Audio, I think.
Yeah, it's Badass Ladies Closing the Gender Gap in Film and Game Audio.
Oh, I saw that one.
Yeah,
it's a good talk.
That was good. Oh, man. Brings me back to MagWest 1.
Yeah. we were all running around back then, too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have more local people around here doing stuff for, gaming and, film. And I think that's awesome, especially that, you're so close to us. It's kind of crazy. And for such a big game, I mean, it's an indie game, technically.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it's making a big hit because, the whole, pixelated revival and kind of that retro feeling and bringing back old classic franchises. It's kind of shining right now, and so I think that this is not only an indie-ish kind of game, but also kind of a mainstream AAA title in a way too.
Yeah, the buzz has been pretty big. I've seen the series for years, and games will just sort of come out, and it's like, oh, it's another River City game. This one, I feel like as soon as that first trailer dropped, everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, it got way more hype than I even thought it would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to happen, I guess. You have girls like kicking a bunch of guys' asses. I mean, that's just a recipe for awesomeness.
For success. Hopefully it leads to great things for you, and we're rooting for you.
Thanks. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get into another track, actually. This next one here, we chose this one for a reason. First of all, it's a great track. We don't play a lot of vocal music on this podcast, and so this is kind of a treat for us because it's something that we both really, really like. So let's take a listen. This is called Bully from River City Girls, composed and sung by Megan McDuffee.
Trying to look so tough.
So that was Bully from River City Girls, written and sung by me.
Awesome.
Does it feel weird to hear yourself singing in another context, not just listening to it on loop for the mix?
Yes.
Oh, weird.
It does.
I thought it was like I was like embarrassed to like sing along with it, because then like she would see me singing along with her lyrics. And,
No, I love that.
Okay,
That's so surreal.
yeah, it's crazy. This is a really good track, and this is one of the first ones I heard in the game. We typically don't play a lot of vocal music on the podcast, and I usually don't like a lot of vocal music in video games, but there's something about the soundtrack where I think that it really works. I think that there's this aesthetic of, you know, the old Kunio games, the old time. I mean, you get the retro looking graphics, you have the old kind of beat 'em up style arcade gameplay. I think a lot of the music encompasses this really early 90s, late 80s, maybe even early 80s sound, and the vocals on top of this have this really airy kind of edginess to them that really just encapsulates everything awesome about that era and this time that the game is kind of going for, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually more familiar with your work in synthwave, and so I was really happy to see you transpose it here, and it really works well. And actually, one of the questions I had was it a conscious choice to just put vocal tracks during regular gameplay? Because in a lot of games, it's like this, it's during critical moments in the game. Like, that's the only time when you bring out the vocals. But you just go to these various areas, and some of them just have vocals and some don't. What was that all about?
So that was in the plan from the get-go, when WayForward was kind of giving me the breakdown of what they wanted. And I think they came to that decision partly based on a previous game they had mentioned, something, I forget, it was like a Wario game maybe, that used a vocal track in one of the levels. And the director, Adam, said like, okay, this is really cool. And then they found out I could sing after they initially, you know, kind of wanted, you know, were interested in maybe having me do the music. He was like, okay, sold.
So they didn't know you could sing beforehand?
Really?
Yeah, basically.
Wow. So they hired you not knowing you have like this whole second like world that you're a part of?
Well,
like
so
bonus.
they were, I guess we were sort of courting each other. And then he found out I could sing as well. And he was like, okay, so we definitely have to utilize this. And so it turned into this cool thing where anytime you see a boombox in the game, it's like I'm coming through the radio.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it ties in. I don't know if I'm allowed to say spoilers on this.
Oh,
what do you think?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so...
It's a beat 'em up. I mean, it's, you know, the story is kind of...
Okay, yeah, so people have probably discovered this by now anyway, but one of the bosses is a rock star named Noize. And the whole time, up until you get to her, you're hearing these vocal songs on the boomboxes, and then you discover that it's her music the whole time.
Ah, so you're not spoiling the game, you're spoiling our episode, because we're going to play that later. No, I'm just kidding.
We actually have a question about that
Spoilers.
exact thing.
We do.
Oh, no kidding.
But why don't we save it for that?
Okay.
Why don't we save it for
All
that?
right,
We'll
all
come
right.
back to that.
Yeah, once we get a little closer to
All right,
it.
let's
Right
go ahead
on.
let's go ahead and listen to another track. This is not a vocal track, but this is a remix of Jail Fight from Shin Nekketsu Kōha, Kunio-tachi no Banka. This is called Knockout. So let's take a listen and we'll be right back.
That was Knockout from River City Girls, composed by Megan McDuffie.
This is a really great track, and this is kind of what I would expect from a beat 'em up. It has like this nice kind of driving beat, not too in your face, not too melodic, but just really energizing and keeping the juices moving, I think.
The whole soundtrack has this works in a game but not video gamey sound, which I really like. I really hate super pandery, like retro style soundtracks. Like, I like chiptunes and all that, but sometimes it feels like you're playing a video game with video game music in it, and this doesn't really do it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I understand that.
Tell us a little bit about Knockout.
A little bit about it. Well, this was one of the very first tracks I did for the game. WayForward had made it known through ARC that the publisher kind of wanted to, I guess, homage a few tracks from previous River City games, and they had some very specific ones. I don't know how they picked them, but they were relayed to me in their purest 8-bit form.
Oh, awesome.
And they were like, well, just, make them fit the soundtrack, make them part of your sound. And so it was actually really fun to transcribe these just by ear, pulling out that, what I thought were valuable melodies and hooks that people would recognize, and then sort of make them synthy.
So now this is from a track called Jail Fight. Do you want to hear just a second of that? I'm guessing you know this track pretty well now.
I do by this point, yes.
Awesome.
I don't know this game, so I just thought it was another track that you wrote. It caught me off guard. I actually found a YouTube comment that said all of the references. I'm like, yes, less work for me.
Less work for us to do.
Yeah, I was amazed that somebody just figured those out.
Yeah, pretty fast too. It was like an early comment. I do want to ask though. So in the beginning, we were talking about your career and how you got started in music. You were doing a lot of classical stuff. You went to school for vocal training, for operatic vocal training and stuff. This doesn't match any of that. So what led you down this path, this more synth wave kind of path?
Yeah. Okay, so
you're wearing a shirt that says Moonrunner 83 on it. I'm digging
it's very synthwave.
Yes,
it is actually a synthwave act that I am part of. So yeah, that's a valid question. Once I kind of went the film scoring route, I got to experiment more with combining my love of 80s film, soundtracks, and getting into that more synthesizer-based stuff. I love Tangerine Dream. They're one of my biggest inspirations.
Nice.
And I've always listened to electronic music. So I actually did the electronic music minor too when I was doing my undergrad for film scoring. So it was kind of this nice blend of the two. And like I said, I always listened to electronic music. One of my first, I think it was maybe my first CD ever, was Aqua.
Oh, jeez.
So I have that electronic, Euro pop background as far as what I liked to listen to. And I'm a huge fan of Depeche Mode, so another electronic band, very quintessential, very awesome. Right. And back in about 2012, when I was contracting for iTunes, a lot of music came across my plate, just, being there and being subjected to music all the time. And people suggested different bands that kind of had an 80s flavor. And that was even before everything got this synthwave label that it has now. So a couple of the bands that I first discovered were Mitch Murder and Laserhawk and Tesla Boy.
Oh my God, Laserhawk.
You have an amazing couple of collaborations with Mitch Murder.
Yes, Mitch Murder. Okay, so that's so cool. Like, I found him in, 7 years ago or whatever, fell in love with his stuff, and then several years later was co-writing with him.
He's one of the best.
Super
no,
awesome.
I know. I'm actually, a huge Laserhawk fan, though. So
trippy.
So
Nice.
I was surprised because actually I can hear he has a lot of that really driving kind of beat that I hear in this too. And I'm just like, wow, like, you guys should do a collab like this.
I would love that. If you're listening, Laserhawk.
Yeah, do
hit
like
me
some
up.
kind of racing game or something. Work with Barry Leach also. That'd be really good.
We should tweet at him. Why not?
There you go. Make it happen.
Why
But
not?
Yeah, so I've always loved electronic music. I had the bright idea maybe, 3 years ago or so. I was like, why aren't I singing synth pop and synthwave? Like, how have these worlds not collided yet? And why aren't I offering vocals to other producers that are making this stuff that I really like listening to? So I just sort of perused the web and started contacting people.
Awesome. And at that point, had you done any vocal work at all? Or, as far as like at a professional
Commercial
level,
stuff, you mean?
commercial stuff, yeah.
When I started reaching out to other producers, probably not. I'm trying to remember. The only vocal stuff I had were like really ethereal film scorey type stuff.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Jeannie, you have anything else? I want to move on to this next track.
Let's get on to the next track.
Keep things going. This is Detention from River City Girls, composed by Megan McDuffie. Let's take a listen. That was Detention from River City Girls. And I take it that you didn't have a lot of detention in school because it did not sound that exciting when I was in there. This is a great track.
Thank you. I've come to think of it, never been in detention.
That's why you've made it. That's why you've made it in places. Yeah. This is a great track. What'd you think, Gene?
I love that buzzy melody that comes in right at the beginning. And I have to say, one of my favorite things about that sort of 80s synthwave style mixing is the percussion is punchy without being like overwhelming. I love that kind of music. I listen to so much electronic music, but I definitely listen to a lot of 80s inspired stuff. And I don't know what else there's to say about this specific track, just that it fits right in.
Yeah, and I think a lot with a lot of these tracks, you know, there's maybe something not too overly complex sometimes with the bass line or something like that, but with all of the almost ear candy hidden things that are in the background that are happening, I think that's where this track really, and a lot of the music, really thrive and keep you excited to listen, because there's just so much extra detail that you could miss if you're not paying attention. Like if you're in the game, if you're just playing, you hear this nice rhythm and the nice beat kind of continuing. But if you're really paying attention to what's actually happening and going on during the gameplay, there's actually a lot more kind of ear candy for you to kind of take apart. And each time you listen, you might pick out a different part. And I think that's something that's really unique about the soundtrack.
Yeah, I was noticing some of those icy bells a little bit more this time when we were listening. But yeah, if you're listening to it in the game, you're hearing more of the present elements.
Right.
That's so cool that you tuned into that, because that's kind of how I approached writing this whole thing.
That's what this podcast is all about. That's all we do.
Yeah, for this, I don't know if it's something I always do or if it was just this soundtrack, but I definitely always started with bass lines. Mm-hmm. Like finding something groovy, putting in, a really punchy beat, and then doing melodies, and then filling in all of the little intricate, stuff that jumps back and forth in your headphones and all the sparkles.
So, I mean, that kind of goes with my next question. What's your process for writing music like? So you say you start with a bass line, but like, what do? You sit down at your computer and you're thinking like, okay, got to write a Detention track. Like what comes to mind? Like what do you start? How do you start that thinking process?
So for this soundtrack in particular, I had a lot of freedom, which was fantastic. Sometimes that's a bit daunting and you're like sitting there with a blank, clean slate, like, I don't know what to do. But for this, they gave me sort of a light description of all the levels and said, okay, well, obviously, here's sort of the sound that we want for the entire soundtrack. So let your imagination go. Like, just, there's a slums area, there's a sort of boardwalk area, there's like the upscale neighborhood, there's a school. So I had those level descriptions, but then I basically kind of settled on a general sound palette. Like I tried to use the same 3 or 4 basses throughout the entire soundtrack, as well as the same, 2 or 3
Keep
drum
it
kits.
Cohesive, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, you got it. And I just kind of went from there. Like, I don't know, school is not scary. It's, maybe annoying, but
it's kind of a safe place.
It's not like gonna be the downtrodden slum feel. It's not gonna be like the chipper boardwalk arcade feel. It's sort of a baseline. So I don't know. I just ran with it. Sometimes I don't even know how I come up with stuff.
Cool. So, Gene, do you want to talk about the story a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
We should talk about the game a little bit.
Yeah, we want to keep this kind of light because we don't want to waste everybody's time when we got a guest on. But so the story of River City Ransom, the old game for the NES, Ricky and Kunio have to rescue their girlfriends. This is sort of a retelling of that story, except this time it's Misako and Kyoko who have to rescue their boyfriends.
Right.
They get kidnapped. And they go on an ass-kicking spree, basically, all over town. And so you have these so-called new characters, Misako and Kyoko, but they're actually not new to the series.
They're the first time they're playable.
Right, the first time they're playable. And I think in the U.S., they were... Misako is from the soccer game that was localized here as Nintendo World Cup. In that game, she's the soccer club's manager, although I think they cut all of that out of the NES game.
Right.
And Kyoko is in the game that we played that remix track from, which, Brian, say it again?
It's Shin, Nekketsu, Kōha, Kunio-tachi no Banka, something like that?
Yeah. It's a Japanese-only sequel to River City Ransom on the Super Nintendo.
Right.
So I actually have never played either of those games, but it's this huge expansive universe. There's lots of characters, and so it was pretty easy to bring some back. Yeah.
The gameplay, like River City Ransom, River City Girls, can be played either solo or with a friend. That's kind of how you're gonna want to play with it. Now, the caveat here is it's no online play. So
I've been hearing that a lot from people.
Couch co-op.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have the opportunity to play it today, but otherwise I don't know. I don't get to sit with you a whole lot in person. So, but it looks really good. Each of the characters that you can choose have their own moves. The game spans across 6 large regions. So I guess you can, and it's not just 6 levels. It's like 6 regions. So like the school has different areas and stuff that you can go through, and you make your way through various cronies and bosses while you kind of complete these little tasks. Along the way, you can pick up loads of different weapons, items, and cash. And cash is important here because it allows you to learn new moves at a dojo whenever you level up and earn enough money. And then you'll end up learning all these new special moves, and you spend a big chunk of your time experimenting with those and kind of playing around and finding your favorite stuff. When it comes down to it, it's pretty basic at its core. It's a pretty straightforward game. It's simple, engaging. Just about anybody can just jump in without a lot of knowledge or hand-holding. It's relatively easy to pull off a lot of the moves, and I think that kind of lends to the other games as well. They were pretty straightforward. You can pick them up, put them down. That doesn't mean that the game doesn't get challenging. Mm-hmm. It's just it's very approachable to anybody, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty simple once you learn the mechanics. In case we didn't mention it, it is pseudo open world. You can kind of go back and forth between areas. So
right, it has like this RPG kind of faux element on top of it, just like River City.
If you play the original River City Ransom or Scott Pilgrim, you kind of know
exactly. So let's jump into another track here. This is called The Hunt, and this is composed by Megan McDuffee. All right, that was The Hunt, composed by Megan McDuffie for River City Girls.
I think this is my personal favorite vocal track. Just like the atmosphere it sets up is so like enveloping. And I have to say, my favorite thing is the chorus. The way you have these phrases that kind of lead into the next line, but you have to like anticipate them.
The heart and then the beat in time. Yeah,
I'm really curious how you came up with the words for it. I just your process in general for writing lyrics for your songs.
You
could make
kind
something
of
up.
you can make something up.
Just give a reason. It honestly varies from track to track. Sometimes lyrics come really easily. Sometimes it's a struggle and a half. Yeah, I mean, for this soundtrack in particular, I kind of just played with the themes of searching, hunting, beating up, just sort of the general themes of the game itself. And I don't know, this one just felt more like a searching song.
Was there any decision about the placement of this track? Who actually decided where it went into the game?
Let's see. I know they wanted one vocal track per area. And I had a description of the area, so I knew this was going to be... Actually, no, I don't even remember where this one is, but...
I think this one's in the mall.
I'm guessing some
I
Hunt
can't remember.
Or something.
Yeah, so is that like the rich neighborhood?
No, I think
that's rich.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So this would be one of the others. The Boardwalk area, maybe?
I don't think so.
No?
It's fine.
It is. It does.
Anyway.
Somebody will correct us in the comments.
Yeah, well, wherever this one went, I think it was, aptly placed.
This is absolutely one of my favorite tracks as well.
Thanks.
Again, I talked about not being a huge fan of lyrics in video games, but this, everything about it just screams, like this especially is like late 70s. This reminds me a lot of like something from like Blondie or Heart or something like, it captures that. It almost doesn't even need the game to just be an incredibly like touching track. And like if I heard this like on some like 80s like synthwave radio station or something, I would never even think twice that it was made like last week or whatever you made. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
And this goes back to what Jean was saying too. The lyrics have like these really interesting cadences where you think you know what's going to come next, but maybe you don't because it's just outside of the beat. And I wanted to ask, kind of tacking onto that too, did you write the music before you wrote the lyrics, or was it kind of like the lyrics just kind of fell into place after you had already laid down the track?
With the exception of Bully, for this soundtrack, everything was written before I went in and did lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd have melodies, I'd have the track already written, maybe not mixed, but at least composed and arranged and sequenced, and then I'd have my melodies, and I'd usually lay down a scratch vocal, so just la la la, to get my melodies, and then work from those to write the lyrics. But Bully, it kind of just came out at the same time. It was strange. I was channeling something with that song. I swear it took me 3 hours to write from like start to finish. Yeah, that one was like melodies and lyrics just popped into my head at the same time.
Now, did you go to a studio to record all of these, or you record these at home?
I recorded at home.
I think I saw a video of you recording or singing in your closet.
That might have been me, yes, because I do that.
Is that so? I was just curious because of acoustics and stuff like that. Do you have like a sound studio at home that you do all of your recordings in, or is it mostly just kind of wherever you're feeling it in the house?
It's converted master bedroom and converted walk-in closet.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Makes
clothes
sense.
and a closet with a door make a great vocal booth.
Awesome.
If you live in the Bay Area, a closet is probably your best bet.
A closet it's probably about the same size as your room.
That's true.
We live on a quiet street, so it works out.
Awesome. Now, the other thing too about the lyrics, the one thing that I keep hearing is that I listen to music even that's not for games or whatever, and I think, oh my god, these lyrics are so cheesy. I don't get that in this at all. Did you have any thought going in that you didn't want to do something that was overly silly? I mean, this is for a game, right? And the game is a bunch of girls beating up people, right? But I don't get that vibe in any of the lyrics. Anything that's like silly or cheesy, it sounds very much, like
it sounds pretty natural.
Yeah,
honestly. Like
totally.
That's good.
So I'm any thoughts going into that, or was it just like,
In general, for me, I tend to stay away from first-person narratives in lyrics because I feel like that gets the most cheesy.
Good point.
So I try to find ways of telling stories without saying, I did this or you did this to me, etc.
Yeah,
sure.
I can see
So
that.
that's kind of just how I approach lyrics in general.
So
Awesome.
you referenced this earlier, and we actually had a question from the audience. And so this is from Ed, one of our longtime contributors and a fan of the show. He asked, there are a few amazing vocal tracks in River City Girls that are performed, air quotes, by an in-game boss named Noize. Were the songs written first and then attributed to the character, or did WayForward describe Noize and ask you to write songs that she might sing? So
We're going to play Noize later on.
We will, but basically I think he's asking, was there always a plan for an in-game character to be the source of this music?
It, sort of. It was like an idea that they had, but it wasn't ever, you have to write these songs as Noize. So it was more like, oh, here's a cool coincidence that we can attribute these songs to the character. That kind of happened as the game progressed and was, in development.
Sounds like a development team.
Yeah.
Oh, guess what? We could just make this happen. Oh my god, it's serendipitous.
I mean, they had mentioned it at the very beginning when we first started working together, but it was never It was never like, please approach these as a rock star.
Sure.
Right. So
I'm glad it worked out, though.
Yeah, me too.
Totally. So before we started recording, we were talking about a bunch of sites kind of messed up because they had they didn't mention you as the composer. It had like a bunch of other people, and
only wrote the bulk of the soundtrack, but here are all these other people.
Here's all these other people.
Here's the famous people. We don't care about that.
So the game River City Girls was actually composed. It was all composed by Megan, but there were some other tracks that were laid down by other artists. So there was some stuff done by Chipsel, Nate Wants to Battle, Dale North, and Christina V. Gene, do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, I'll go through it real quick. So Chipsel wrote most of the boss tunes, with a few exceptions. She's a chiptune musician from Northern Ireland. You may know her work from Super Hexagon, Spectra, the remix album Chip to the Necro Dancer, which is really great. I was just listening to it a few nights ago, and Octahedron. Nate Wants to Battle is a voice actor, singer, musician. He's done covers and parodies, a lot of originals. He is the person that sang, well, he wrote the music for the intro and the outro, but he sang on the outro track.
Right.
Also, Christina V is the singer on the first track. At first, I was like, that doesn't sound like Megan. And
me too. I was like,
because I know you had vocal tracks in here. But yeah, Christina V is a singer, drummer, and voice actress for many English dubs for anime, including the voice of Sailor Mars in the recent series. She's done a whole bunch of other things, but that's probably the one that stuck out to me the most. I grew up watching Sailor Moon. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I did too. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, and Dale North is a multi-instrumentalist, piano, vocals, brass, and he's written music for tons and tons of things, including the Nintendo Minute jingle. He wrote the Wizard of Legend soundtrack recently, the Dragon Fantasy series. He's also an early name in the OC Remix community. You might have seen Dale North. And
he's just from up north. He's in
SF, I think.
Yeah,
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And he wrote the little arcadey jingles. He wrote a lot of like really, really chippy chip tunes. There's like kind of an FM
right.
tune.
I think you can pick up some of the arcade games or the cartridges or something and play them.
Yeah.
Purchase them in a shop or something like that, and that's music for those. Right?
Yeah, we're not going to be playing any of those tracks today, but they're all on the album, so you should be able to hear them. And if you see it says featuring that person, they were the ones that wrote or performed on the track. It's kind of a weird
I couldn't figure that out. So it says featuring, and it's usually like a collaboration thing, but you guys work completely independently.
We did. So the only reason that is the way it is on the digital releases and streaming is so that it would show up as a release in my Spotify, as opposed to a various artists album.
Yeah,
I see. So can you tell us a little bit about I know you said you had nothing to do with each other, but was there any back and forth at all, or did you even know that they were going to be doing music for the game?
Yes, I knew. Okay, so no back and forth whatsoever. We each created in a void. And I didn't get to hear any of the other artists' music until the soundtrack came out.
Oh, wow.
Well, slightly before, because I was the one in charge of ordering all the tracks and doing sort of a mastering light on it to make sure it went out all clean and nice. But yeah, we didn't have any contact with one another.
Wow.
Creatively. I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question?
I think that was my only question.
I
think that was it.
I think we should move on to our next track.
Why don't we do that?
Yes.
This is Don't Give a ... from River City Girls. And this is actually a take on the main theme of River City Ransom. So let's take a listen, and we'll be right back.
that was Don't Give a ... composed by Megan McDuffee, and originally a remix from the main theme from River City Ransom.
I knew it right away. When I heard this track before, when I was working on notes for the game, I was listening to the soundtrack kind of on repeat, except for the vocal tracks because they would distract me too much. But I heard this track and I was like, oh my God, this is totally River City Ransom.
This is the only one I recognize.
Yeah, this is the only one I recognize too. But what a great track. It's kind of everything I was hoping to hear, kind of incorporating Megan's music into this old kind of classic nostalgia-based track that I know, you know.
Without pandering too much. Like, it fits in your style. I didn't feel like it was like too on the nose.
You don't notice it right away. It kind of creeps in on you. And it's kind of the best of both worlds. I like it.
Yeah. And it's a really good take on the original track. I didn't know what it was for about 15 seconds, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of smiling a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I had a couple of questions I forgot to ask in an earlier section. So you've been working in games for a little while, but how did you actually get started in the music industry? You said you were hustling, but I know you from some of your other work, like you were doing film scoring, you were doing soundtracks and trailers. How did you get to that point in the first place?
Well, let's see. So I did a stint at the Berklee College of Music. I did their online masters in orchestration, and at the same time I was working for Apple, which is when I fell in love with the synthwave stuff. But from that point on, I was basically looking anywhere and everywhere I could for film scoring stuff. And my first kind of legitimate film scoring gig was in response to a Craigslist ad, of all places. A local Bay Area filmmaker guy named Paul Baker. He still flits between Mountain View and LA. We still chat. He put together a little short film, really cute. And I approached him. I responded to the ad. He liked some of my samples, and that was my first gig.
Nice. And how did you get into games after that? Because I know you were working in trailers and soundtrack for a while before you started to get into there.
Well, I've always loved games. I love playing games, and I thought it would be a really cool thing to pursue, so I just sort of networked in different places. And I think the first thing I did was actually a piece of mine that somebody wanted to license for their game. So they wanted a pre-existing track to use, and I made a loopable can't say that word. A loopable version of that track. And I'm trying to think like what after that happened. Oh, I went to GDC for the first time.
Ah,
oh nice.
That's a great one.
Yes, that is like the place to go. And
they usually do like a composer kind of get together too at GDC every year, right?
Yeah, they have
like a game audio.
Yeah, they have a sort of like under the radar. They call it Carousel Con.
Right.
Because all of the game audio people go hang out by the carousel.
Oh
Yerba Buena Gardens.
Right.
Yeah, and that's every day, I think, or at least Wednesday through Friday. But anyway, super fun. My first year, I went by myself. It was super overwhelming. I was like, wow, what is this? There's 40,000 people here. What do I do? And I ended up sitting next to a guy named Tyler at one of the award shows the very first night. We got to talking, totally organic conversation. We swapped business cards, and I worked with him on a little game prototype, and that ended up being scrapped. But after that, he got a couple other people interested, and they started making a game called Mimic Arena, and it turned into this kind of really cool platformy, almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's very platformy. It's very, very chaotic, and that was pretty much my first game score.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So moving ahead, how did you contact... Now, WayForward is a pretty well-known developer and publisher at this point.
Yeah.
How did you score a job with them?
No pun intended.
Yeah.
So, interestingly enough, the other composer, Dale North, who did the arcade-style tracks on this soundtrack, he was the one that put me in touch with WayForward.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Dale and I had never met one another, which was pretty interesting, that he recommended somebody he hadn't even met before. We're both in a group called the Materia Collective, and it's a group
I just met Sebastian this last weekend.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so we both belong to Materia, and he, I guess, had heard of me or knew that I liked working in this sort of retro 80s flavored synth poppy stuff.
Nice.
And he was kind of long-standing friends with the people at WayForward.
Oh, cool.
And they were chatting one day, and they said, hey, we're doing this new project, River City Girls. We're thinking about doing a synth pop soundtrack. Do you know anybody that would be good for that? And I guess he threw some names out, but they liked my stuff the best and got in touch with me.
And I think it's great, too. It's very fitting. You know, you have a soundtrack or you have a game that is very empowering for women, right? It's like the women are saving. It's a reversal from what we've seen in, you know, the old games. Women are saving the men, and your soundtrack is, you know, saving everybody else as well. And so I think it's a good mashup there.
As a bit of a side note, I'm really, really happy for you, but I remember I was trying to get you to do something a while ago, like just come to the meetup, I think it was, and you were super busy with something, and I was so pleased when I saw that this came out on the other end. It's like, of course she was busy for the last couple of months. She was working on this huge game project.
Oh, yeah, it was a lot. It was a big project.
Yeah.
How long have you been working on River City Girls?
It was in development for a year and a half.
Nice. And
So-
how long were you working on it?
About the same.
Oh, so you came in pretty early. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know it's less common nowadays, but in the old days, we would talk to composers. Sometimes they'd have to write a score like right before the game came out.
Like a month out, weeks out.
Yeah, I'd say the bulk of it was done in about 8 months.
Oh, cool. And so that's like equates to like a track a week, or sometimes it would be like a day or longer. It depends.
Yeah, it definitely depended. I usually would do about 3 to 4 tracks every week and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, something notable about River City Girls is it's a big departure from earlier games in the series. We talked about that before. It still retains its roots somehow. How did that kind of go into... I mean, you looked at the other games, right?
Barely.
Barely? Was there any kind of overlap in your mind about tying that old style stuff in, other than the remix stuff that you did?
Nope.
Well, that answers the question.
Yep, just
Moving on.
Just the homage tracks. I got, a very small taste of what the originals sounded like, but
That makes sense.
yeah, that's about it.
That makes sense. The game is beautiful, though. The graphics, I mentioned earlier, it's all pixel art, but it's very like vibrant colors. It doesn't really look like any of the other games, other than the fact that it's like kind of has this like old school aesthetic. But
Yeah.
You run around, you beat people up. The scenery is really beautiful. The graphics really pretty. Soundtrack is killer. The one thing that's awesome about this that kind of stands out from any of the other things in the series is it has a lot of animated cutscenes in it, which were really, really nice. It was cool to see them fully voiced and actually, kind of telling about the story and, seeing different things going on. I think there's like a whole manga like montage that happens between levels, right?
Yeah, there's according to the soundtrack, at least 5 manga cutscenes. So every time they'll play essentially a comic panel cutscene, and they'll walk through it, and the music will change. We're gonna actually play one of those in the episode.
Yeah. But all the manga cutscenes were drawn by Priscilla Hamby, an American illustrator who goes by the name Rem. I think does an illustrated or web illustration comic or web comic called Devil's Candy. I think it's pretty popular.
I've looked at some of her art. It's really good.
It's
really
super good,
yeah,
yeah.
it's really, really good. The other things in this game, though, it's a lot of just really well-designed and well-placed enemies and items and stuff. Everything looks really neat the way it should be. It doesn't really fit into like this old 16-bit style, and doesn't really fit into like a new 32-bit. It kind of has this weird, its own thing.
Yeah.
I kind of compare it to Scott Pilgrim, but not a lot.
I keep comparing it to Waku Waku 7, which our listeners might know, but it's a pretty
Right.
obscure Neo Geo arcade game, which has the kind of high contrast, no black borders around the characters.
Right.
Very nice animations, very smooth.
Right. Now, there are some little Easter eggs, though. You get like little Kunio popping up in the corner, tips and
Yep.
stuff. That's awesome. That's really awesome. All right, let's go ahead and jump into some more music. This next track is... Did you want to play Watch Your Back?
Yeah, if we have some time. Yeah, I think we can get away with one more vocal track.
Yeah. This is called Watch Your Back. This is actually a crowd favorite, so I'm glad we're playing it.
All right, that was Watch Your Back, composed and performed by Megan McDuffie.
This is another really amazing vocal track, and one thing I noticed about the way you sing, and it's partly your voice. You have this really beautiful high kind of soprano voice, but you also have there's a lot of airiness and breath in your vocals. I can hear like it's almost like a whisper, even when you're not whispering. It has this, I get almost ghostly sound to some of the tracks, especially this one. This one probably by far, but I really appreciate that.
Cool, thank you.
I hear it now too. No, I'm just kidding.
So I wanted to say two quick things. One, I really love that bridge right before the chorus comes back, that sort of light ascending melody. And second, something that I really just enjoy about the vocal tracks is you have a little bit more of a full range, whereas a lot of the background game tracks are a little bit more even because it's during gameplay. I feel like these are like really full, and it's a nice contrast.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were going for.
Tell us about Watch Your Back.
Okay. It's sort of hard to remember since I wrote most of these about a year ago. This was, I know, like for the more slummy area, so I definitely wanted it to be darker and more moody, I suppose. And I don't know, this is just kind of what came out of that inspiration.
I like it. I guess we'll jump into another track.
Yeah. This is Skull Crackin.
All right, let's take a listen. All right, that was Skull Crackin, composed by Megan McDuffie, and this is for River City Girls.
Who doesn't love a 12/8 beat?
Yeah.
I love triplets.
Yeah, little honky tonk. I like it.
I remember you performed a cover of, I think it was it from Fern Gully?
Yeah, that's a, yep.
I think it was also in a similar kind of swung style.
Yep,
which I
that
really
one does
like.
have a swing.
Yeah.
Fern Gully. Tell me about Fern Gully.
Do you remember that movie?
I do.
Okay.
So you did a track, like a remix of it?
Yeah, she came to the meetup and it's like, I'm working on this track. I just want to know what you guys think. It was really good, but it was definitely just kind of like a little side thing you were working on.
Well, yes, it's a project I'm still working on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Is it something you can talk about?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm under my own NDA.
I thought you just brought it to us because we were so special to you.
Well, I wanted y'all to hear it.
Yeah. I think you got some great feedback that night.
I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah. So Fern Gully, staple of my childhood.
Mine as well.
I adore Tim Curry. Like, he is the best thing.
We have some really bad
ever.
Tim Curry accents on our Gabriel Night episode.
Amazing. He has such a distinct voice.
Oh man, he's a great guy.
He's so cool. But anyway, I've always loved Tim Curry. His villain in Fern Gully as Hexus is just so good. And he has this song, and I've always been drawn to that song. And I'm like, someday I'm going to cover it. I have to do it. So I've been working on an EP of cover songs. That's one of them, Toxic Love, in this sort of gritty synth pop style.
Awesome.
Well, let us know when it's out, and we'll get the word out.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So we had a couple of questions. One of them is we haven't really talked about. What was your relationship with WayForward during the development process? How were they in just general day-to-day? Did you just send them tracks? And what was that process like?
They were awesome. They were essentially my dream client. They were super nice, super easy to work with. They kind of just let me do my thing. They basically, when they hired me, they were like, we love your sound. We just want you to do that.
Awesome.
Here's, descriptions of the levels. Here's some artwork. Here's a couple, handful of synth pop tracks that we like certain elements of, run with it. And so I initially started with like a test track, I guess. Mm-hmm. They wanted to feel it out. And I'll never forget the reaction I got back. It was an email basically in all caps from the game director. It was like, oh my God, this is amazing. How did you do this? This is the best thing I've ever heard in my whole life. You have to do more. So
nice.
That's exactly the reaction that you want.
Yeah. It was perfect. So
wait, they're gonna pay me to keep doing this?
Exactly.
Excellent.
That's what I mean. Dream client. So they basically were like, well, just do tracks as you want. We have a sort of internal publishing deadline at the end of every month. So get us a handful of tracks before the end of each month and invoice us. That's how it went.
Wow.
And did they generally just take the tracks as is, or was there much of a feedback cycle between the two of you?
There were some edits, some light revisions, nothing too drastic. It was usually just like, well, this instrument's a little weird, or can you try a different synth sound on, this chord structure? Anyway, it was usually about sound choices.
That's pretty light feedback.
Yeah.
Usually, because I know sometimes they'll just say this doesn't work or whatever, but I'm glad that wasn't the case.
Oh, I'm so glad. None of it was, we hate this, start over.
It would have been a shame to have some of these tracks not make it in because they're always so good.
There is one track that did not make it into the game.
We did have a question about that, so is it just the one? That's not actually that bad.
Just the one from me. I know Chipsel had an extra boss track that didn't make it either.
Are those going to show up somewhere someday?
Nope.
That's too bad.
I actually purposely left it off of the soundtrack because it was so different than everything else. I felt like it would just be weird.
Can we please play it? Do you have it?
I don't have it.
Oh.
It's very... how do I describe it? It's all a cappella. It's just like 4 layers of my voice singing Oz. Dum, 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 dum.
So, moving on. Another question we had was just generally, what software and tools do you use in your production process?
I use Cubase. I love it. It is super intuitive. Really good for MIDI sequencing, especially.
Nice.
Yeah, that's kind of my powerhouse. I do a lot of my stuff in the box, so all soft synths and VST plugins, as opposed to actual analog gear. I do have a Juno 6 that I pull out every once in a while, but it doesn't have MIDI, so I don't use it as often as maybe I should.
It doesn't matter how you create the music. It just turns out so good. So it doesn't.
Thanks.
Anyway, you can tell us anything, and it doesn't matter. It's good.
Whatever it takes to get the job done.
Yep.
That's the motto, I think.
I've actually upgraded a few things since I did this project, but you'd never know.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump into our next track. This is Tidal Wave, composed by Megan McDuffee.
That was Tidal Wave from the River City Girls soundtrack, composed by me.
This whole block of tracks, I think we just went right down the list like, yes, 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 these are all going in.
This was hard to go through the soundtrack and pull stuff out because there's a lot of stuff we really liked. This track, maybe I'm way off base here and I'm just kind of thinking about it myself, but I get this strong sense, especially on some of those kind of really evasive synths. It's almost like Dick Dale guitar kind of thing going on there. No, kind of Tidal Wave matches the surf rock kind of thing. No,
interesting.
Am I just making that up?
That's awesome.
Okay,
that you.
I have this surf rock vibe from this track. I do.
Maybe you're influenced by the title.
That could be totally. It happens.
I didn't pick up on any of that, so you're on your own, Brian.
I like to think outside the box, Gene.
Oh, that's fine.
By reading a title.
Sometimes I have the dissenting opinion on the show, so we trade off. So we had a couple of questions. This is from another one of our listeners. This is sort of a two-parter. It's about the transition from synthwave to writing music for games. So how would you describe making that transition? Are there any things that you had to do differently when writing for a game? And what are the lessons you learned from your time writing in synthwave music that you were able to apply here?
So I was doing both simultaneously. Mm-hmm. I did my first game score way before I even did any synthwave stuff. So...
Really?
Really.
I guess I never really followed the timing that closely.
Yeah, I've only really been doing at least vocal synthwave for the last 2.5 years.
Huh.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
I feel like I see your name everywhere, and I'm like, oh, you've been doing this. You're an old hand at this.
It was a busy 2 years.
When Gene was bringing up, when we're going to bring you on for the show, he's like, oh yeah, she's been doing vocals forever, and da 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 da. I'm like, wait, really? 2 years? That's not a lot of time, man.
I mean, I'd sing for myself, and I'd sing on film soundtrack kind of stuff that I was doing for other people, but it was never, like I said, I didn't really have the idea of pitching my voice to other producers until about 2 years ago. So I don't think that there was really a transition. I wrote for some indie titles, indie games, and the only thing really to keep in mind is how repetitive a track is. So is it fatiguing? Does it have sort of an arc that, an ebb and flow that'll keep it interesting if you listen to it forever and ever? Especially with a beat 'em up, you're grinding away. You have to.
Yeah, you may hear this song for like 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, and you're going to come back to an area too.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's definitely something that's different when writing for games. That and just making a seamless loop. So keeping in mind where your crescendos and where your climaxes and your breakdowns are to make it seamless. But other than that, there's not a whole lot different. And yeah, I mean, I've been doing electronica of the not synthwave variety longer than I have been doing synthwave. So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Yeah.
I think so. Let's get into our next track here. This is Boardwalk from River City Girls. All right, that was Boardwalk from River City Girls.
I told Brian we can't leave this one off the show.
Well, I wasn't planning on cutting it. It's a really good track.
This is the stupidest thing ever, but every time I hear this, I think of the soundtrack for F-Zero GX. I'm like, this is Captain Falcon dancing in the club after he's done racing.
That's amazing.
It's just like he's voguing. He's going for it.
Every time I see this track, I think, oh, I bet Megan was walking around Santa Cruz and she's like, this is exactly what this is the track. This is the soundtrack right here.
It's not, but that would make sense.
I love the energy on both Tidal Wave and Boardwalk, but that melodic figure, I just like, that's the one that kind of pops into my head randomly, and I'm like, damn it.
It's good. It's good. Now, I have a question actually about this track and all the tracks in this soundtrack. They're almost to the T, the exact same time. Tidal Wave is, 2 minutes. Boardwalk is just over 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes. The vocal tracks are looped, but about 2 minutes. Was that a conscious choice to make them all relatively the same chunk?
Yeah, they WayForward decided they wanted the instrumental tracks to be a minute long. So a minute loop.
Right.
And the vocal track started out actually as a minute loop, but then we kind of discussed and felt like that wasn't really enough time to develop a vocal song. And, you know, lyrical, whatever, lyrical story. So we extended it to 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to give those the full, you know, space that they needed.
To kind of breathe and stuff.
Exactly.
Let's get into our next vocal track, actually. This is, we talked about this earlier, this is from Noize, and we'll be right back.
Guess you are rather bold. Finally we meet. So let's give 'em a show. How's this heat? Feeling those chemicals. Call the doctor. You're in trouble. Adrenaline kicking in. Don't you bother. He'll never win. How does it feel? All of that fear. How does it feel to show your face here? Don't test me now. You were never a threat. I'll make you taste your regret. Don't push me now. You are never getting through. Just for showing up, I'll destroy you. Sure made a mess. Just take a good look. You in control. I've rigged this test. Start getting nervous. How will it feel when I take your soul? Your fatal mistake. Too late to back down. You wish it's over before I'm through. You're mine to break. Guess you bit off more than you could chew.
That was from Boss Noize for River City Girls. And, you know, this is something I just noticed now. Was this... I could be totally off, like I have been for so many other things so far. But the vocal track and then the harmonization that you do, was there any conscious choice there to have that, to kind of mirror that there's kind of like two girls together? Was there any part of that, or is it just for the tracks themselves?
Ooh, that's an interesting take. Nope, that was not in the plan. I just like to harmonize.
Get that feeling. Yeah, no, but I get that feeling. Like when I'm listening to some of your other tracks and I hear the harmony, I kind of, I'm picturing the game, you know, and I'm picturing the girls as they're, you know, kicking butt, taking names, and I kind of see that harmonization as like the buddy the buddy cop.
That's really cool because I honestly didn't see any gameplay until the soundtrack was all done.
That's surprising, but
for this day and age.
Yeah.
I had the manga cutscenes to work with, so I could time the score to those, but I didn't see any gameplay until after it was all wrapped, pretty much.
And the manga stuff has almost nothing to do with the gameplay in terms of the art style, so that must have been... I mean, I've watched the playthroughs of the game, and it works in context, but was it weird to see it for the first time and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
That's the Boardwalk I was composing for this whole time.
Yeah, it was super trippy. It was like, oh, there's that. Oh, and there's that. Okay, they put it there? Interesting.
When we talked about this before we were going to do the show, you were telling me, oh yeah, and Chipsel wrote the boss tunes. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know, I really just wanted to stick to your tracks because we're talking to you. I'm so glad you wrote this track. Usually when we're listening to these, I'll wait till I get through the whole soundtrack before I decide which tracks, but as soon as I heard that opening lick and then the speed up, I'm like, oh, This one is in. This was probably the first track I picked for the show.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
A lot of people really like this track too. You know, it's funny though. It's funny that they had like Chipsel do stuff, Dale North do stuff. I mean, Dale North stuff, his is kind of in this weird special bucket because it's for like games within the game, right? Like that kind of thing. But Chipsel's music is it's really so different than yours. It's not really like there's no cohesive like connection between your guys' music. I wonder what WayForward was thinking in that. I'm not saying it was a bad idea. It seems like an interesting choice for them to do that.
I know that one of the directors, Adam, was super excited about working with Chipsel. He'd always wanted to work with her, and he thought this was the perfect project for her. But he knew she wouldn't, or her strength was chiptune and not necessarily the synth pop that they wanted. So I think that's probably where that came about. Is they wanted to have her on the project, and they figured the boss battles would best play to her strength. So
it does work well for her for sure, and her song is a lot less melodic, more frantic and melodic, or frantic and kind of panic-inducing, so it does fit with the boss.
Yeah, they have the energy of boss tunes for sure. A lot more high energy, crazy percussion, lots of like very anxious chord progressions.
Right.
They're good tunes. Definitely check those out when you have a chance.
Right. So let's get into our next track. Gene,
this is going to be our last track before we go to our outro. This is Azukay. I'm assuming it's Yakuza backwards.
It is. It's Yakuza backwards.
You know what? I didn't even see that until now. Oh my God, I feel dumb.
It's okay. People have asked me, like, what does this mean?
I love
What is this?
I love anagrams, so I was like, I think I know what this is.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold it past them. Anyways, let's take a listen and we'll be right back.
All right, that was Azukay from River City Girls, composed by Megan McDuffie.
Tell us about this track. It's good.
Thanks. This is one of my personal favorites. It actually started out as one of the hardest tracks. For some reason, I had the worst writer's block on this one.
Oh, no.
I had a little bit of a bass line, and I just didn't know where I wanted it to go. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I got over the writer's block, but I think I just took a lot of breaks. And I've always been a fan of like throwing a random whip crack in there. So I just
love it. Love it.
Every time I hear that, like there's an OC remix of a Castlevania song, and it has a whip crack in it. And it was just like, I got to use that somewhere. So it ended up in this
Very
piece.
good.
And the little, I guess I call them the wiggles, the synth stabs that have that intense vibrato on them.
Yeah, I was getting some deep electro vibes.
That was the Michael Jackson moment for me. The woo.
Yep, the wiggles. I call them the wiggles. But those were in part inspired by Chromeo. I don't know if you're familiar with Chromeo, but
A little bit, but not enough to really speak with any authority.
okay.
That's the name.
I recommend checking them out. They have a very retro kind of 80s but disco and funk
That sounds
infusion.
Like right up my alley.
Yeah, they're so fun.
Awesome. So about this game, going back to it a little bit, it's still pretty early. It just came out a few weeks ago. So far, all the reviews have been pretty favorable, and a lot of people say it's been pretty fun. I haven't seen anything negative about it yet. You know, it's still early, so it's kind of sinking in. People
it seems like a really solid game. From everything that I've seen of it, it looks like it plays great. And I've been hearing a lot of praise for the soundtrack. Been watching the listens tick up. I like in doing research for the episode, I would have to use YouTube sometimes, and I would see the counts jump like 5,000-10,000 sometimes a day. Quite a lot of listens.
Nice.
I don't know where it's going to be when this thing finally gets out, but it'll be quite a lot, I hope.
Yeah.
That's always the hope.
Yeah.
I know I've been watching my Spotify stats just slowly creep up.
As you gain more and more popularity. This was Arc System Works' second go at using a Technos IP. They tried with Double Dragon 4, and it wasn't all that great.
Yeah.
It was kind of like it was okay in the sense that it was kind of doing the same thing as the other games, but it didn't really do anything new. It was kind of like, why? This actually, I think, has a lot more going on for it, right? It's kind of modernizing something that we love, and it takes all that really fun nostalgia and kind of brings it forward a little bit. It's not really trying to overdo it and overthink things. I think it's keeping it nice and kind of simple, and I think that that's a really good trait of this game and a good trait of WayForward.
Well, I think that mostly wraps up what we're going to be talking about. We're really, really glad that you were able to make this work. I know you're a very busy person, Megan, but we're glad to have you here in person to answer all of our questions.
Yeah, totally. It was super fun.
Well, we had one more quick question. Do you have any recent projects that you'd like to plug, or any upcoming projects you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, I think I briefly mentioned the cover song EP that I've kind of got, in the works. Other than that, I've just been kind of doing a lot of music for myself, as a recording artist as opposed to the composer side of things. Mm-hmm. And my buddy Moonrunner and I will be writing a new EP soon. If y'all haven't seen the music video I released earlier this year called Streets with Moonrunner, I highly recommend checking it out. We're basically writing a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll put a link in the show notes so that other people can check it out as well.
Oh, rad. Yeah,
it's an amazing video. Megan actually demoed it at a meetup earlier and kind of walked us through the production. I wish we had recorded that talk. It was really good. But definitely check Streets out. And you had an album that came out about a year ago. I really liked it. Hero.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've sort of been listening to that one intermittently.
Yeah, I've been listening to
like,
that too. Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that was kind of my biggest synthwave project when I first started doing the vocal thing.
So I did have one more question, actually. Did you have a lot of fun writing for a video game? Was it, I know you've done it before, but did you enjoy it enough to say that you would want to work on more game projects in the future? Or is this kind of like, whatever?
Yes, absolutely, 200%. I had a blast with this. It was
Cool.
so fun. This entire project was just Yeah, I don't know.
Awesome.
As soon as I got the artwork and the description, I'm like, this is going to be so fun.
Awesome. So we'd love to see more stuff from you in games down the road. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been an awesome opportunity. So today we covered River City Girls, composed by Megan McDuffie. We talked about its production, all of her work, just this wonderful soundtrack that you guys should check out. It's on Spotify, Apple Music. It's not on Bandcamp, but it's on YouTube, so you can listen to it there too. Anywhere else you can buy? Can you buy a physical copy of this?
Well, funny story. They sold out of the vinyl run in about an hour.
Wow.
The first run of 1,000 sold out in 90 seconds.
That's insane.
Well, you can't get a vinyl copy of this.
You cannot.
Not yet. So maybe if they do a second run of vinyl, maybe you can pick up a copy.
They might. There are digital downloads available on iTunes and Amazon.
Awesome. If you want to know more about the show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for our show notes and our track lists. We can also be found on Twitter at pixelatedaudio.
Leave comments or feedback on the website. Come to our Discord channel. We've got a lot of lively discussion there. People post original music, lots of game tracks. I see new stuff there every day. There's so much really good music flowing through our channels. We have a really great community. If you're new to our podcast, check out some of our past episodes. I don't have any specific ones in mind, but I'm just going to say we had the distinct honor of interviewing 3 powerhouse women recently. We talked to Saori Kobayashi, Chibi Tech, and now Megan McDuffie.
All in a row.
And I don't know which one's going to come out first. So whenever you're hearing this, we recorded them all within a week. And now we were saying we have a lot of editing work to do. So
that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to come out between, and Kobayashi is going to be the last. But I'm really excited that we're able to meet with you today and talk about your work. This is a great opportunity for not only us to learn more, but all of our fans and all of your fans to learn more about you and your composition style and hear it from your mouth. This is awesome. Thank you so much for being on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So we have one track Gene had mentioned before. We're gonna play a track from the Manga sequence. This one is one that we like the most. This is called Manga 5. Mambo number 5. This is Manga 5. Again, this is composed by Megan McDuffie. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you in a few weeks for the next episode.